Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our annual Memorial Day Mass. And I want to thank, first of all, Father Rafael Rodriguez and the staff priests here at Cristo Rey for opening their church to us because of the threat of rain. So we'll see if it rains. If it doesn't, fine. But at least we're protected here, for we can. And thank you for coming. It's always a beautiful Mass. And an opportunity for us really to reflect upon those who've gone before us, especially those men and women in our military services who made the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedoms. And although this is not a liturgical feast day in the Catholic Church, in fact, today is the memorial of St. Philip Neri, who was a wonderful saint, sometimes called the second apostle to Rome. He lived during the Reformation, so the late 1500s and early 1600s, in a time when the church was in disarray. And he wanted to be a missionary, like another contemporary of his, Ignatius of Loyola and Francis Xavier, and these early Jesuits who were going all over to the ends of the world, and he wanted to go as well. But he received his vocation to stay in Rome and to be an apostle to Rome. And he did. And he did remarkable things in restoring the faith of a church that was confused and in disarray. In fact, when he was finally canonized by Pope St. Gregory X in 1620, there were 4 canonized on that same day. St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, St. Aloysius Gonzaga, and St. Philip Neri. And supposedly the headlines in the Roman newspaper the next day was, Pope canonizes 3 Spaniards and a saint. That's how much they loved St. Philip Neri. But the same fire in the heart of a missionary who will go to great lengths to preach the gospel all over the world, like our current Pope, Leo, who spent 3 decades working with the poorest of the poor in Peru as a missionary. That same fire in the heart of a missionary also lives in the heart of those who protect us and defend us in the military. It's a desire to want to lay down one's life for one's friend, which Jesus says there's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. And anybody who joins the military, whatever branch it's in, they know that they are very likely to be in harm's way at some point in their life. And today, we get to honor them in a particular way. And like I said, it's a civil holiday, as we all know, but it really fits into our Catholic theology because we believe, perhaps more than any other religion, that our prayers for the dead are efficacious, that we can offer masses and help them if they're in purgatory. That's part of our theology. And so instead of just remembering the dead, like people are all over the country, visiting cemeteries, singing patriotic songs, honoring those who've gone before us, instead of just being sort of a human action, as good as that is, what we do in praying for them and offering Mass for them and sacrifice really can impact them because we believe that our prayers can assist them. That's the part of what we believe in our Catholic faith. So, in a special way, this Mass is really something that we really have an obligation to do. You know, it's part of the spiritual works of mercy, and we're commanded to do this. we're also commanded to encourage and to support young men and young women to consider serving our country in the military. This weekend, President Trump was the commencement speaker at West Point. Vice President Vance was the commencement speaker at Annapolis at the Naval Academy. And both of them gave remarkable speeches. And just in the few months of this new administration, all branches of the services have experienced an increase in enlistment. Because every human being has a desire to give of themselves. That's the very best of human nature. And God planted that desire in our hearts. That's the love. The love to lay down, first of all, the love of God, where our first love goes, but also the love of neighbor. That's one of the reasons why I, this year, have released two of my priests, two young priests, to go full-time in the military. Father Lee Moshe Creel, who will be reporting for duty on the USS Gerald Ford, one of the newest aircraft carriers in our Navy. On board ship, he'll have 4,922 parishioners. And Father Michael Zimmer, who will now be full-time as the chaplain to the Air Force Guard here in Nebraska. And we also have another priest, Father Joel Panzer, who serves full-time in the military, who's stationed at Fort Bragg. And we've had a long tradition of supporting our services with priests because those men and women need spiritual shepherds. They need chaplains. They need spiritual guides. Because when you're in the military, you do face danger. You do face death. And it's such a fruitful ministry for priests to be there for those men and women who may go into battle. Thanks be to God, we're not currently engaged in warfare right now. But who knows? And the military is in great need of spiritual chaplains to help and guide them and give them strength and courage. And I'm leaving today with a group of seminarians to walk the Father Emil Kapan walk in Kansas, where Father Emil Kapan, who was a chaplain during the Korean conflict, who is now venerable, and his cause for canonization is before the Holy See, and could very well be beatified any day now, because two of the miracles, who I know both of these, I was a priest of Wichita, I know both of the beneficiaries of these two miracles that are just medically unexplainable. One was a young high school kid who was a pole vaulter who broke his neck and was paralyzed from the neck down. And his parents had a great devotion to Father Kapan and prayed during his surgeries. He came out, and you can't even see anymore in the x-rays where the broken neck on his vertebrae are. Gone. Medically unexplainable. The other was a young man who was running in a 10K race and collapsed with a heart attack and was taken to the hospital, and his wife and his son were in the ambulance as they were going, and they were praying to Father Kapan, and all of a sudden there was a flash on the inside of and his heart had stopped. His heart had stopped for about 7 minutes. And all of a sudden there was a flash, and he woke up, and he was perfectly fine. So those are the two miracles that are being presented on the cause of Kapan. And Father Kapan, who died in a concentration camp in Korea because he had repeatedly escaped from the concentration camp and had gone and gathered food because many of the soldiers were malnourished. And he would go and gather food from neighboring villages and break back into the camp. And he did this repeatedly over and over and over, and finally was caught. And he then was put in what they called the box, and he was starved to death. But that's how much he loved And he felt that his sole purpose was just simply to keep the morale up, because he knew that probably most of those prisoners would die. And so he went around, and he was a great jokester. And he went around and tried to build up the morale of his fellow soldiers. And it's interesting that just a few years ago, his remains were after the Korean War in 1953 and 54, there was a deal made with the Korean government that the remains of those who died in the concentration camps in Korea could be all gathered and taken to Hawaii. And they were buried in one big, huge mass grave called the Punch Bowl. Maybe you've heard about it. And just recently they were going through, and they knew exactly those bones from the different camps were in different sections of this huge mass grave. They were able to gather together, through DNA testing, 95% of the bones of Father Capon. And they reassembled them. And his family flew over to Hawaii, and also some of his fellow soldiers. And they viewed the skeleton of Father Capon, and one of his soldiers looked at the face and he said, that's Padre's smile. That's Padre's smile. He recognized just in the skull and the jaw, he recognized the smile of Father Capon. And so he was then finally given a funeral, a proper funeral, which he never had. Died in 1952, and the funeral was just 3 years ago in the cathedral in Wichita. He's just one of many, who we know about, who are heroes and who inspire young men and young women today to want to do the same. Because patriotism is a great virtue. And it's a virtue, it's a Christian virtue, because it's that desire to want to serve, first of all, not myself, but to serve others. And also one who wants to lay down one's life, even if it calls for death, that they have that love that Jesus said is the greatest love. No one has a greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. And so we get to honor them today. And so it's a great privilege for us to pray for all of the deceased. My father was in World War II. He was a gunner on an aircraft carrier, the USS Casablanca in the Pacific Theater. Saw a lot of action during World War II, and always loved to hear the stories he would tell me about. He like his classmates, they couldn't wait till their 18th birthday to go join. And his happened to be 2 weeks before high school got out, and he left before. He had 2 weeks left of high school, and he left to join the day after his 18th birthday, because he didn't care about high school. He didn't go to college. He did come back and sign a professional contract to play baseball for the Yankees, and so it was sort of what he did instead of going to college. Didn't make it to the bigs, but played in the minor leagues. But that's that generation. That's that great generation who are such an inspiration to us. And that's the kind of patriotism that we need to rekindle in our young men and young women today, and I think we're beginning to see it. I think we're going to begin to see it in the coming years. So as we honor those who've gone before us, let us offer our prayers today for them and for all who've served us and who continue to serve us in all the branches of the military, and that those who have given the ultimate sacrifice, may God have mercy on their souls and bring them to eternal rest. Amen.